Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, before we started talking, or on the podcast, we were talking before the podcast, and you said we get to talk about a new college football rule. It's like, oh, I bet this is something really exciting, is it? And no. But we're going to talk about it, so that's fun. So that'll be exciting. New college football rules. Hooray!
Well, and not new yet, just proposed. You know, they're talking about ways to not necessarily shorten the game, but limiting the number of time of what they're calling exposures. These are plays of real snaps. These are special teams snaps. These are plays called back for penalty. Like anytime a ball is snapped, whether it counts or not, they are counting these as exposures, and they are trying to figure out ways to limit the number of exposures. And I think it was the ACC commissioner said, you know, we've got some proposals that would end up basically eliminating almost like 1.2 games of exposures for players, which in my mind means this is a way to justify asking them to play extra games in a 12-team playoff, which I guess if you want to take some plays out of games in order to have more games, you know, that's one way to make it work. But the two proposals that Dennis Dodd wrote about this week are these are what's being considered among what is being considered in ways to limit the number of exposures and shortening the games. Treating incomplete passes the same as runs out of bounds. And right now, after a run out of bounds, basically the clock will start again on ready to play when the ball is placed, ready to be snapped within normally, like if it's last 2 minutes of each half or whatever, last 5 minutes, the clock stops completely. And then the other one is no longer stopping the clock after first downs, which is really, for me, one of the big differentiators between the NFL and college football. I prefer having the clock stop after first downs, and then it gets started again when it's ready for play. For me, Tom, I'm okay with treating incomplete passes the same as running out of bounds, because you've got these up-tempo offenses now that can kind of, if they want to get as many plays in as possible, they can still do this. We just always see after an incompletion or whatever, even the no-huddle teams are like, well, let's slow things down, let's talk about it. And they're not doing the super high tempo after an incomplete pass, but nothing's saying you can't. And so if offenses really want to get as many plays out of a game, it would seem like this would be one way for everybody to kind of get their cake and eat it too, where some teams will have fewer plays and others will be able to work around it if they want to. If an incomplete pass, the clock stops for a bit, you hurry up and get to the line of scrimmage if that's what you want to do, and then you snap it when it's ready for snap, and you don't really lose too much time. You don't lose too many plays. So I prefer, of these two, I like that one because you can work with it. I'm anti stopping the clock, not stopping the clock after first downs, because it's too much of the NFL for me.
It is one of those things that's a real point of differentiation between college and the NFL. And, you know, I think one of the important pieces here is there's a carve out for the last 5 minutes potentially of the half in the game. So, because that's when it really matters, is when you're going down the field and, you know, you're down by 6 points and there's 45 seconds left, you've only got one timeout. Well, if you can keep picking up first downs, that clock stopping makes a big difference in terms of how many plays you can run and how fast you can get down the field, which leads to more exciting finishes of football games, which is a good thing. So that, I think, is an important carve out. It's one of those things that, like, yeah, it's fine, but, you know, I think that this is always, as always, this is being painted in the most altruistic way possible. And you, I think, nailed one of the two pieces of what's actually behind this is, well, if you look at this, we've saved you so many exposures, so now you can play a whole nother game, and it's not actually any worse for your body, which is like, you know, shaving, you know, exposures or plays off of the Akron game is very different than the amount of, you know, punishment your body is going to take if you're playing Alabama. I'm sure I don't need to spell that out for people, but that's one piece of this. The other piece of this is, you know, college football games drag on a long time. I saw you ran a Twitter poll on Thursday morning about how long college football games can drag out. And they were more than 50% of people were saying no, which is like, I mean, that's certainly an opinion, but that's not an opinion you'd have if you have sat in the stadiums in a lot of cases. Because the game, it's not the game itself that's the problem. When the game is happening, that's fine, that's exciting. It's all the commercial breaks. Now, Lord knows we can't possibly ask the TV networks to take any fewer commercial breaks or shorten commercial breaks. We can't do that. Our superiors at the top of the mountain at the cable TV channels, they rule everything, so we have to kowtow to them. But we have to shorten the game in other ways. So let's give you less actual football, but no fewer commercials, just less plays in between those commercials, which I would assume from a viewer's perspective is probably not going to be the most exciting way to possibly handle that, and is probably not going to help the in-stadium viewing experience for a lot of weeks. So that's something to keep in mind. But I mean, this is, in terms of a way to do this, like, it feels like this is one of the things where when they float this, it's like they've already decided to do this, and now they're just kind of working out the details because they've decided this is a necessary step to whatever they want to do next. So in terms of an actual way to implement this, like, it's fine, but I would much rather prefer they lop a commercial break out, or just take one commercial out of every break so people are not sitting in the stadium for 2.5 minutes doing nothing, like 4 times a quarter. That would be great.
And meanwhile, we have technology as such that you could basically run ads on the field during play of game with a television product. Unfortunately, you probably, like, Ohio State probably doesn't want Budweiser running on their field, a Budweiser ad on their field when they're a Coors school or something like that, where you've got maybe some conflicting businesses. But like, that capability is there. If they wanted to, they could use that instead of a commercial break. Like, cut a couple of commercial breaks, have some on-field ads, have some on-air reads. Like, you can. I don't know that you need to squeeze every dollar out of this if you're concerned about the product, except people keep watching it. The complaint is, like, the product is more of a complaint from the people in the stands, really, like, because fewer people are going because the television product is so good. So why would the networks do anything about that? You're like, hey, people are staying home to watch the television product. If anything, they want more commercials. That's their thinking. You can't give these people enough commercials. But so I did ask on Twitter, because I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I was listening to the radio, satellite radio, and they said, because I roll like that, one of the callers called in on the college football show and said, the only people who complain about the length of games are the people who cover it and the people who talk about it. Fans don't care. And I was thinking, I was wondering, is that true? Because really, yes, media thinks games are too long because you're sitting there for a long time, or you're trying to get. There's few things more annoying than when your game is supposed to be starting and there's another game in that broadcast window, like, still wrapping up, and so there's certainly annoyances there when you're covering stuff. But so I asked on Twitter, and do you think college football games take too long? No received basically 2-1 the votes of yes. Now, that's mostly from fans. There's certainly some media voting in there, and those are the ones who are saying, I'm guessing it's almost 100% of the media voting. I'm assuming 100% of those are saying that yes, it takes too long. But like Marcus Hartman, our buddy, chimes in saying pace of play is the bigger issue, and really, it's the stoppages and the reviews and the commercials, and it's hard to just keep something. There's no really smooth, like, it's kind of clunky in terms of the broadcast, where, like, 2 minutes of play can take 15 minutes because there's this review. Now it's time for a commercial. Now there's, an injury or whatever, or somebody faking an injury. So I get that, but I think maybe, I wonder if we're blowing this out of proportion. And I say we, I mean, like, media are blowing it out of proportion, because fans don't seem to mind. Although I did get a couple of interesting responses. One was, it's too long when you're at the game, and it's fine when it's a broadcast. Then another response, like right next to that, said, it's fine when you're watching it. It's fine when you're at the game. It's just too long watching it. So these are completely opposite answers, both saying like, yeah, I can see why it's too long, but it's not so long when, the other. But I go back to the 2006 season when they started the clock on the kickoff. On every kickoff, that's when the clock started. That ended up taking like 13 plays out of every game, basically two possessions, like one possession for each team. And that didn't last. That lasted one season, and all of the numbers went down. And I'm interested to see if there is a similar reduction this year, if they go through with this, and if it sticks, because we have to get used to the fewer numbers of plays, so that there can be more games played later on.
Well, Tony, this is why you look at yards per play and not total yards. That's why this is just another reason why you need to look at per play stats and not total game stats. There you go. Look at me, ahead of the curve. How about that? It's going to be interesting to see how teams adjust to this, because I mean, to your point earlier, teams that are going to hurry up, even if it's an incomplete pass, you're going to start the clock when the ball's set, ready for play. That's teams that are hurrying up, a lot of times, 5 seconds are going to run off. 5 extra seconds are going to run off if you're running a hurry up as opposed to something else. So it may add up to a couple minutes, but I don't know that if unless you're trying to really milk the clock. If you're really trying to milk the clock, then potentially this could make a significant difference. You're running enough extra 25 seconds or so between plays, something like that. This could really change some end of game strategy stuff too, or at least mid game strategy if they're not doing it for the last 5 minutes. Where right now you look at teams throwing the ball on when they're trying to run out the clock, throwing the ball and it's incomplete pass and it stops the clock, and so they're going to run the ball, and no one's stupid enough to throw it. Well, now maybe it's not such a penalty to throw the ball, so maybe it changes your end of game strategy a little bit. There's going to be a lot of kind of interesting fallout from this in a bunch of different directions. So we'll see. We'll see if it gets approved. We'll see exactly what the rules are when they get implemented. I think not having it change for the last 5 minutes is going to be the most important thing, because that is a significant piece of generating maybe some more end of game drama and giving you more chances. And in the final minutes when it's really important in a close game, that I wouldn't want to see change. But first 55 minutes, I think that's probably not the end of the world if some of that gets tweaked. And then, if it ends to your point about the rule from 2006, like if it ends up being like, this is too much, we've gone too far the other direction, you can always change it back.
Yeah. And I know there's a percentage of people that think the clock stays stopped when players go out of bounds, because you see on Twitter or when you're watching with people, they're like, why is the clock moving? It's like, well, it doesn't always stay stopped after a player goes out of bounds. And so I think that like you said, that for the first the 50 minutes of a running clock, if you will, is fine, because there are still ways to combat it and to adjust to it. So I'll be interested to see how that what comes of that. I think there is possibly going to be a vote on that on Thursday, so we'll see what comes from that. Tom, we are also previewing the offensive line, the Ohio State offensive line, heading into spring right now. We've talked quite a bit about the offensive line already, and exactly what it's going to look like. And I don't know that we know just yet. And for each of these position previews, we try to start out with a depth chart. And so I think we agree it's Paris Johnson at left tackle, Luke Whippler at center, DeJuan Jones at right tackle, Matt Jones at left guard, and then Donovan Jackson or Harry Miller at right guard. Is that exactly what you have as well, Tom?
I think that's probably about right. And I guess there's a small chance that the guard is just pick two of those three guys, where, theoretically it could be Harry Miller at left guard and Donovan Jackson at right guard. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't think so. I think I would put, Matt Jones was one of the best six last year. So you would assume if neither Donovan Jackson nor Harry Miller were among the best six last year, and Miller was obviously injured, but that you would assume that he would be ahead of those guys. But there's a lot of spring and there's a lot of summer still to come. So we'll see. But I think that you're probably right in terms of it's going to be those 6 guys, and it's probably Miller and Jackson fighting for that 5th spot at the right guard starting spot.
And then in terms of who's behind them, that's all, I think, completely up in the air, because you still need to see how all of these lower rated tackles that they've signed and recruited over the years, who are now 2nd, 3rd, 4th year guys, have developed. Can they get into the 2 deep? Where are they pushing? I think you probably got a guy like Josh Fryer and Enoch Vamahi who would be in the top 8 and can play almost any position along the offensive front, just depending on where they need him. So, they've got their best 5, and then the best 3 of the next 8 or whatever, for your best 8, and you try to figure that out in the spring. And then you look at the biggest questions, and I think one of them is it going to be Harry Miller or Donovan Jackson? I think maybe the biggest question is Paris Johnson going from right guard to left tackle. We just assume he's going to be good and he's going to be fine. But this is where we start to find that out. And I don't know how much we find out other than the stuff we'll hear, because I don't care what I see in a spring game in terms of if a guy's going to be, oh gosh, Paris Johnson gave up 6 sacks in the spring game. And it's like, well, yes, but remember last year when Jack Sawyer had 6 sacks in the spring game, and then how many did he finish with? Solomon Thomas one year had 8 or whatever in a jersey scrimmage or something like that. So really, I'll be more interested to hear what people have to say about him behind the scenes and than anything we get to see, or unless we get to see some one-on-ones here, whenever that would be. But I think that for me is, because it's such a huge position time, that's probably my biggest question on the offensive line. And I think the answer is probably a good one, but I keep saying probably because we don't actually know.
We don't actually know, but at the same time, it feels like you've kind of seen enough out of him that you should feel pretty optimistic about his ability to do all of that stuff. He's got the measurables, he's got the quickness, he's got the feet, all the stuff that you worry about for a left tackle. Like, does he have short arms? No. Is he too small? No. Are his feet slow? No. I mean, like, and you saw him playing somewhat out of position last year at right guard, and still he gave up. I saw Pro Football Focus had him giving up 1 sack all year, something like that, at a right guard position, where that's not where he necessarily is like perfectly suited to play. He is built like a tackle. So you would assume going outside and playing tackle, he should be pretty darn good at tackle. I don't know that I'm expecting a big drop off at the tackle positions this year. They got very good. They got a very good season out of Nick Petit-Frere last year. I think you're going to get a similar season out of Paris Johnson. And then the question is, I mean, we've been talking about this since the first year he was on campus, and when Thayer Munford decided to come back last year, it was like, oh boy, are they only going to get 1 year of starting out of Paris Johnson at left tackle? And I think that's a possibility. It's not a given yet. He has not. I don't think he's played a snap at left tackle yet in his college career. So, you putting the cart before the horse a little bit right now. But he has the measurables. He has the pedigree. If he puts a good year of film out there, I think it's a real possibility he could be, in that first round conversation for next year. And then, off he goes to the NFL, which, that's up there with, you can't possibly just get 1 year out of Dwayne Haskins as a starter. Well, sometimes you do. You can't possibly get 1 year out of, starting from left tackle at Paris Johnson. Like, well, maybe you can. And they've gotten more out of him than they got out of Dwayne Haskins, because obviously he was a starter last year. He even played in the college football playoff a little bit the year before that as a fill-in guard when Wyatt Davis went down in the Sugar Bowl, I believe. There's a point where Wyatt Davis went down and Paris Johnson came in and against Clemson, I think. So, there are, I think he's someone who, it's not a given because you haven't seen it yet, but I would be pretty surprised if they did not at least get a, very good year out of him. Not necessarily perfect, not necessarily, no one's saying Orlando Pace, but I think a very good, Nick Petit-Frere type season, I think, is kind of in the ballpark of what I'm expecting out of Paris Johnson this year.
I will say the Buckeyes got more out of Dwayne Haskins in his 1 year than they have out of Paris Johnson in his 2 years, because Dwayne Haskins beat Michigan. Paris Johnson,
twice.
2 years he's been at Ohio State, has not beaten Michigan. So
Dwayne Haskins did it twice, you got to remember. That's it's true.
So I think Paris Johnson's probably approaching this as, this could be my contract here. This could be it. This could be my last year. And if you approach it like that, Tom, I always like to say, shoot for the moon, because even if you fall short, you land among the stars.
Wow, that's really inspirational. You should paint that on like a palette or something and hang it in like bathrooms or kids' rooms or something like that. That's really good. You should trademark that.
I will. I also, Tom, I tell people, hang in there, and then I mimic myself as a cat hanging from a branch for inspiration.
I prefer alliterative things. So my personal favorite that I just made up just now is live, laugh, love. Also, have you considered putting pumpkin spice in coffee? I'm just thinking out loud here, but
now you've gone too far.
Yeah, sorry.
You have, so yeah, I wouldn't. It's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that this would be Paris Johnson's last year, but then it becomes a situation where if he plays really well, he's like, well, I could go and be the top 30 pick, or I could come back and be a top 5 pick. That's maybe the best of the best scenario would be the decision that he has to make for Ohio State. He plays so well that he's a first round pick, but not so well that he's a top 5 guy. And then he comes back for a senior season, because again, it's really rare for offensive linemen to only play 3 years. But when you land the number 1 offensive lineman in the nation and he's a top 5, top 10 guy like Paris Johnson, you go into it thinking we only may get 3 years out of him.
Yeah, that's not, when you get the guy who has the measurables and all the guy who just walks in with a lot of the stuff that they're going to be looking for at the combine. That's the kind of guy where it's like you don't ever expect a guy to be a starting offensive lineman his freshman year. You don't usually expect a guy to be a 3-year offensive lineman. Like, that's a 4 to 5 year position generally. And you're right. That would be the perfect scenario for Ohio State, would be Paris Johnson coming out and having a very good year this year, but not top 10 good, not top 5 good, where, that's the difference between, an $8 million contract and a 20-something million dollar contract. That may be worth coming back for another year, where you get a good year and then maybe you get one more after that. Because I think this will probably be DeJuan Jones's last year. I think he's got one more after this if he wanted to, but you would think if he has a good year, this is probably his last year. So you would like to not lose both tackles in 1 year if possible. But yeah, if they could get that, that's kind of the equivalent of the week 1 game where you don't play particularly well. You got some stuff to learn from, but you get a win. Like, that's what coaches love. That would be great for Ohio State's coaches if Paris Johnson has a good season, but not quite up to the top 5 level. Although I suspect if he has a top 5 draft pick kind of season and they get a championship out of it, they would probably be okay with that too.
Yeah, if he just has a season like Jamarco Jones, Thayer Munford, Nick Petit-Frere, that's perfect. And then the next year as you said, as you compared him to, he could try to be Orlando Pace, which is what you compared him to.
It's not my fault. It's not my fault that he walked down the ramp with Orlando Pace at the same time during one of his recruiting visits. I just took the picture. I wasn't, I didn't tell him to do that.
Well, if you just stand up a bunch of offensive linemen up against the wall and you're like, pick the left tackle, that's Paris Johnson. He's the one, because he looks it in every way. The biggest concern, I think, maybe for me, because I think there's enough there for a starting 5 that they'll find that in the spring, and it shouldn't be too bad. How does new offensive line coach Justin Frye mesh with everybody? How do they take to his teaching? How difficult is it to go from one coach to another coach? Are the techniques different? Is there a little bit of a foreign language going on, and is there anything lost in translation? how do they adjust to him? And sure, they're working with him now in terms of studying and talking about techniques and here's what you can work on. I can't watch you work on it. I can't tell you what to, I can't be in your vicinity while you're working on it, but, and how do they, how do they learn what he wants from them, how he teaches, and then how well do they put that into practice? And so I don't think it's much of a concern because you've got a very good coach. You've got talented players. I think as I'm trying to figure out concerns like that kind of strikes me as one where, well, it's a new coach, so it's still a little bit up in the air, but I do believe it is an addition. It's a plus for Ohio State to go from Greg Studrawa to Justin Frye. So I think this eventually works out, but there's a little bit of a, hey, just keep an eye on it type of thing.
That's probably about right. I mean, this is something I think is a net positive long term, but year one, anytime you bring in a new coach, and that's a new head coach, a new coordinator, there's always a little bit of a learning curve. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve on the defense with Jim Knowles and that whole new staff. So, and we've talked about that a bunch, and we're going to talk about that more probably on the next show when we talk about the defensive line, where even the only guy, the only defensive staffer with continuity, there's some concerns with because he's got to learn all the new stuff. So anytime you have a change, you're going to have some concerns there. But yeah, as far as concerns go, like Ohio State's offensive line has like, rich person concerns, not like how am I going to get dinner tonight? It's like, well, the scuff on the bumper of my Rolls Royce didn't buff out completely. So that's not great. It's not what you want, but to have the talent they have in terms of 6 to 8 guys who they're probably going to be at least semi-comfortable with being starting caliber like they had last year, 6 guys where it was just, okay, well, now you got to slide this guy in here and, move people around, but you're always playing guys you're comfortable with. It feels like they have enough talent that they should be at that point before, by the start of the season. So yeah, there's going to be some stuff that has to get sorted out between here and there, but a lot of the concerns with the offensive line is much more like a year or two down the road. Like when these guys leave, okay, well, the next the next kind of group, the next generation of these guys continue to develop to the point where they're comfortable with those guys a year from now. That I think is more of the concern than the top. Your problem this year is figuring out which of the 5 guys of those guys you probably are going to like enough are going to be the best 5. That's the concern rather than do we have 5? That's a very different problem.
Yeah, and I think they'll be okay, but it's still, let's see what the new coach thinks. Everybody has a clean slate, so maybe it won't even be Paris Johnson left tackle and DeJuan Jones at right tackle. Who's to say, Tom? It could be completely up in the air. Nobody knows. It's a complete mystery. Let's talk as we do really quickly about what Michigan has going on the offensive line. They return to Zach Zinner at right guard. They've got Trevor Keegan at left guard. Ryan Hayes at left tackle is a second team All Big Ten guy. They do lose center. I think they lost another tackle, Andrew Stuber. So they've got some guys back. They get a transfer center from Virginia, Oluwatimi, who was a Remington finalist. So this looks to be at least a starting 5, and they'll find another tackle. They've got some guys that have been in the system for a while, and so they'll find somebody else to be that 5th guy. But it looks like it could be a pretty good group of starters. Now, last year's offensive line won the Offensive Line of the Year award to the Bill Moore, the Joe Moore Award, and so I think that was kind of like they weren't the best offensive line in the nation. I wonder how much the loss of Hassan Haskins will factor into how well they look this year. But still, I think they're going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. And when we do our tail of the tape, like there could be an argument for Michigan for sure.
I think there's a real possibility that Michigan's, again, even if they're not ahead of Ohio State, and it's a conversation. Even if they're not, they're that's probably 1-2 in the Big Ten in terms of offensive line. That's even setting aside Wisconsin, which feels like they are automatically one of the first or second place teams in the Big Ten in terms of offensive line. So yeah, I think the Joe Moore Award last year probably had a lot to do with the final impressions that Michigan's offensive line left, which Ohio State fans may remember. The offense, I think, for Michigan is going to be pretty decent this year. I think my concerns for them are more on the other side of the ball, and we'll get there shortly. But I think that this is going to be a pretty good line. I think that this is going to be a line that will probably let Jim Harbaugh do a lot of the stuff that Jim Harbaugh is going to want to do, which is one of those things that I think, we talked about this with the quarterbacks. Are they going to sort of drift back to the Jim Harbaugh offense and a little bit more man ball? And is that going to be dependent on which quarterback is in place and all that kind of stuff? But I think he's going to have the offensive line to do what he wants to do there. He probably has, I don't know that he has the Hassan Haskins kind of back this year that he would probably prefer, but he's got good running backs. He's got a good offensive line. He's got, he has one quarterback who's the kind of less mobile Michigan kind of prototypical quarterback, and he's got the more mobile quarterback. So which direction is he going to want to go there? But he's got options. Like this is a Michigan offense that I think is going to be pretty good this year. And I think that's almost unquestionably going to start with a pretty good offensive line.
It's interesting because they have an offense that if he wanted to, could probably score 40 points a game. But does that just put the defense back out on the field too much? So does he want to play trestle ball, play man ball, and protect his defense? Or does he want to make the most of his offense and protect his defense that way by scoring 40 points a game if your defense is going to give up 24? Or do you know what, let's do what we do. We'll run the ball and we'll score 34 a game and try to hold the opponent to like 17 or something. So I assume he's going to side on the more conservative aisle because that's what he does. But he has an offense that could be explosive if he wanted it to be, and if he had the faith in it, and the faith in his quarterback, Cade McNamara, assuming that's who it will be, we'll see. But the talent is there. It's just a matter of will they make the most of it? I don't know. Tom, anything else before we wrap up the show?
I think we're good. I think we've covered the bulk of the stuff, and now we get to move to defense next time. So that'll be that feels like where a lot of the excitement and drama is around this spring. So that'll be fun.
It will be fun, Tom. I look forward to it. So that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for joining us. Remember, catch all of the shows here. You got Tom's Morning Scoop. You got Kevin Noon's Big Me Kickoff, Alex Gleitman Around the Oval, Bill Green and Mark Givler with the Gives in the Bank show as well. Those are all on your podcast platforms of choice, so and also on YouTube. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will talk to you later.